Good evening, everybody. It's Steve with Real Progressives. Tonight is going to be a departure from our normal format. Very, very excited. We're going to have some opportunity to do some questions and answers. A lot of you guys are faithful followers. You come here, you watch, you learn, and it'll be a nice opportunity for us to go ahead and let you ask questions of Joe Firestone, one of the most knowledgeable men on the planet that I know of. Joe's gone over some very specific things here of late, in particular talking about, repealing the iron law of oligarchy and talking about the Peterson Foundation and austerity. And he's also spoken in great detail about the machinations of the Federal Reserve and how debt is retired and what debt really represents, and the fact that the United States can never, ever, ever, ever go broke. So Joe is going to do some Q&A. But before we get to that, I want to say a few points about the selection of the DNC chair today. I think that we have empirical proof as of right now that should require like zero additional research. The Democrats have shown who they are. They've told us in spades, we are the Republican Party. They've told us beyond words that they are, in fact, the party of Wall Street. They have, in fact, told us that we don't like you progressives. We don't want you progressives until the election comes, and then it'll be your fault if we don't win. So for all of you guys out there who have wondered what's next, might I introduce you to two separate initiatives beyond the Green Party? Three options, in my opinion, right now, none of which include the Democrats. The first one is obviously the Green Party. They've got the infrastructure. They've got the years of experience of frustration in trying to build this. That's the first one. Second one, my friends at the Progressive Independent Party, Eric Bloss and her gang have done incredible work trying to pull together disparate factions on the left that are completely and utterly despised by the Democratic Party. It is up to us to help facilitate that. And the last one is a up-and-coming opportunity within the draft Bernie for a People's Party. And while Bernie Sanders may have no interest whatsoever in doing this, even if he does not, it doesn't matter. The point is, it's time to get the hell out of the Democratic Party and create a party that represents mankind. So without further ado, let me bring on my guests, Joe Firestone. Jay Fire, welcome back. How are you, sir?
Thank you, Steve. I'm really fine, except for what happened today.
I'm kind of happy they did it. If they would have put Ellison up there would have been just enough pseudo-progressives that would have gotten excited, would have said, well, see, they're showing some promise. And they would have done the same thing, but they would have said, see, it's just the realities. There's bad Republicans. But by
that's a reasonable view to have. But it was still just one of those things that really makes you grind your teeth,
Absolutely.
It's like these guys are so freaking blind. They're just so blind and so deaf. They don't deserve to be in politics anymore.
Absolutely.
They have no sense of where the country is. They're totally out of touch, and they remain out of touch. And they think they can win just with the stinking money. I don't think they can anymore.
Well, Joe, let's talk about that for just a second. Here's the problem. And I'm going to be brutal. And if you want me to take you off the screen for a minute so you don't have to feel the full frontal I'm about to throw out there, you let me know. But here's the bottom line.
The screen if you want, and then everybody can see me smiling.
Okay, so here's the deal. The Democratic Party has a large flock of sheep, a large flock of people that are not the sharpest knife in the drawer, shall we say, people that like to carve turkeys with spoons, and tend to follow along right off a cliff. They don't care where that cliff leads to. They are vote blue no matter who, and they are unthinking, unwitting dullards. And that's what the Democratic Party is counting on. So they don't care what they put forward. They have an agenda. Their agenda is Wall Street driven. And they know the vote blue sycophants will follow them wherever they lead, even if it means to their own deaths. That's how bad and that's how awful a vote blue sycophant is. The Republican Party, they are who we thought they were. They're awful. There's no two ways about it. The Democrats continue to pretend to love us while shoving a shunt right up in our kidney when they kiss us on the cheek goodnight. So in my opinion, the Tom Perez thing was the best thing that could have happened. It was the best thing because it does away with any pretense whatsoever that they are progressives. And anybody that tries to peddle that shit to me now, I know, is either A, sleepwalking through life, B, a liar, or C, dull as a spoon. You got three options and there's no other. There literally is no other. Any other excuse is just noise because they've shown who they are. We know who they are. And, you know, for those of us who are just human beings, forget being woke, just human beings. We see them for what they are and we reject them outright. So that's my take on today. What do you think, Jim?
I have a very similar take. My first thought on hearing it was, that's the end of the Democratic Party. We're getting out. That's it. And I mean, I'm not even going to pay attention to them anymore.
Why? Yeah, exactly. I can't. I don't. Yeah, exactly.
I'm done. Yep. I just want a new party. I mean, I look at the Greens, and I look at the people in the Green Shadow Cabinet. By and large, those people are magnificent people who in their lives have exhibited nothing else except care for their fellow Americans. They are a terrific bunch. They make the kinds of people that the Democrats would have put up for the cabinet had they won look sick. They just look sick. I'm talking about as human beings.
Yep.
I'm not talking about as people who had one time served in a bank or served in the Senate or served in the House. I'm just talking about the kind of people the Greens would appoint for Secretary of Treasury, for example, for Attorney General, for example, for Secretary of HHS, for example. There's just no comparison whatsoever for Secretary of Defense. There's just no comparison at all.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, the people the Democrats would normally appoint are people who lack imagination and who, compared to the Greens, are incompetent. That's the best way you can describe them.
I agree. Now, I will tell you, just so we're on the same page, I am not a registered Green. And the reason I'm not a registered Green is because the Greens and that same shadow cabinet have partnered with Zarlenga and Positive Money and the AMI, American Monetary Institute. When the Green Party makes a decision to drop that alliance, there's a strong chance that I could join the Green Party. As of right now, my preference would be to go along with the Progressive Independent Party. They're an umbrella organization that looks to seek to unite the different tribes of the left. Because, to be fair, there's a lot of progressive democratic people out there that are trapped in the duopoly mindset that would gladly jump over and do something different. But they refuse to be a part of the Greens. For whatever reason, the Green Party has caused some people to not like them, or maybe it's the purity of it all. Maybe it's the idea of completely dismantling capitalism, not speaking of any transitional strategies. Whatever it is, there's a large group of people that didn't vote for the Green Party when they had a chance to this past election. So for me, I'm looking at it like this. Anybody that's a progressive, wherever they stand, I support at this point. I'm not ready to go to bed with any of them until one of them steps up and boldly, like Ajamu Baraka says, teach me MMT. When somebody like Ajamu Baraka says, teach me MMT, you know what? I'm listening. Ajamu Baraka, he's definitely a Green Party guy. So that makes me say there's hope. But I'm not there yet because there's people in that group that won't even bother reading the things we provide. They sit there and they're obstinate about learning about how our economic system works and how we can make change today. And because of that, good people, I like them very much. But when I hear greening the dollar, when I hear democratizing the dollar, and I hear we've got to do that before we can do all these other things, I got no time for that. I can't abide that.
I don't have that.
That's right. So that's my problem right there.
Oh, we don't hear that from Kevin and Margaret.
Well, I hope not, but I think that Kevin is kind of on board with AMI, believes that we have 20 trillion in debt that we are in danger of, and I believe that I believe they're very much tied to AMI. With all due respect to them, and I care very much for them. I like them very much, but they are tied into AMI. We spoke about this when they were on my show I guess about a month and a half ago. They are not.
Yeah, so show.
Yeah, they're not quite with. They said they're with MMT, but they believe in order to be MMT, they got to green the dollar and do the AMI thing, and that's full reserve banking. And when you do that, and you're basically eliminating. That's not MMT.
Yeah, you're eliminating policy space.
Yeah, it's a horrible mindset. It's a terrible belief. It's a god awful fake. It's a fake monetary. It's something based on something that doesn't exist. And so for me, my goal as a progressive is to fight for truth. And when you sit there and you peddle the myths of the fractional reserve system, and you go about this process of trying to make it out to be that you've got to dismantle all these things before I can save you from Social Security. We've got to do this because we can't go in further debt. The debt is nonsense. I mean, you've talked about that countless times. Ellis has talked about it countless times. We've had John Harvey talk about it. We've had Pavlina talk about it. We've had Stephanie Kelton talk about it. Everybody under the sun has talked about it. I mean, we've had Fidel. We've had Stephen Hale. I mean, and we'll have more. And yet we still hear this stuff about the debt and how we've got to do these things. And it's like, guys, I'm here. I love you. I want to support you. I want a Green New Deal. I will do anything I can to get a Green New Deal. The one thing I won't do is subscribe to a horrific monetary policy made up by people that don't understand economics, peddling myths and lies that get us into a bad place. I can't do it. I won't do it. And that right there is the linchpin for me being a full-on green. Fix that. You got to. I'll fight round the clock like I do for real progressives.
Yes, I agree with you about that. I also am not a registered green. And I also was very concerned about the monetary positions they took. But I think they've been evolving.
I hope so. I hope so. I really do.
I think the interview last night is an indication of that. And
Yes.
I think there were some indications from Margaret and Kevin also.
I got my fingers crossed. I like it. See, that's the thing. I like all these people a lot. Like these are people I would want to spend a lot of time with. I mean, like I really, really like them. And I like everything about them. But what the problem is like they've got to cancel out. Like I want this Green New Deal, but while I talk about this Green New Deal, I'm going to embrace a monetary policy that basically cancels out the Green New Deal. I mean, it's unfathomable. It's really, I think it comes down to non-econ people taking an econ stance, founded in good intentions. Fidel was very clear in that. He goes, listen, PMI kind of came from a bunch of people, maybe they didn't know anything about economics, but they had good hearts. Give them credit for having a good heart. But they have a good heart that's going to literally wreck their ability to deliver. And what they're offering, their Green New Deal, is exactly what our world needs. Forget just the U.S. I mean, that is a model for all countries. You know, and Jill would always talk about having, you know, employment offices, local employment offices instead of unemployment offices. And I thought, that is the job guarantee right there. That's the job guarantee. Couldn't be much closer. They're so close, but this is a non-starter. To be in bed with Zarlenga, to be in bed with PMI, or not PMI, Project Management Institute, Positive Money, it really, really is a non-starter. It literally is one of those things where I try and talk to them about it, and instead I get a link to the Positive Money website. This is our official policy. We're greening the dollar. We're going to democratize dollar. We're going to bring people's money back. And it's like, guys, this is bunk. And I can break it down for you. And my God, my betters, you and Ellis and everybody else, you can break it down way down past it. And I'm just a lay person by comparison, you know? And so why is it so difficult? It's all marketing. It's a lot of buzzwords. It's really hard to compete with a hashtag end the Fed, hashtag democratize the dollar, hashtag, you know, and it's like, it may sound cute. It may fit great on a bumper sticker, but it's horse shit in a chef's salad. So anyway, that's my take. So let's talk real quickly, Joe. You've been talking lately about the austerity that is coming to America. And you have been talking about the different enemies of the state, if you will, the Peterson Foundation and others, quite frankly, who are eager for us to do something really stupid as progressives so that they in turn can thank us as they sweep us back under even more austerity. So just give a quick recap of what we've been talking about the last couple of weeks.
Okay, well, first we've been talking about the influence of the Foundation and the network that it is at the center of within the DC and New York axis. And we've been talking about how many lobby groups and think tanks are networked to Peterson's foundation. What we haven't really talked about so far are the people in government that, based on their pronouncements, seem to adhere to the Peterson view right down the line. And you look across the spectrum, whoever comes to the fiscal summit, Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, Tom Price, Paul Ryan, John Boehner, okay, when he was in power, okay, all of the people who have a position of leadership in both parties spout the basic Peterson line. Even until recently, the Democrats were spouting the free trade line. It's only recently that they've departed from that. They even had taken up that part of the agenda, looking favorably on the trade treaties the Obama the administration was trying to negotiate until the party in the period 2013-2014 got a clue. And then gradually the whole party in the House turned against the trade deals. When I say the whole party, I mean roughly 160 people out of the 188 people turned against the TPP. Okay, and in the final votes, only 28 of the Democrats crossed over to support it. So 7/8 of the party, at least 88%, 89% of the House party got away from the Peterson line at that point. But even then, the leadership failed to squelch the minority. They could have demanded party discipline. Had they demanded party discipline, they could have defeated the Peterson forces on the Trade Promotion Authority bill, which, by the way, is still in place, and which Trump could use in order to negotiate whatever trade deals he decides he wants to enrich his cronies and himself. Okay? But at the same time, the main point here is that right up until 2013 to 2014, almost everybody in Washington was echoing this line. You could see it in the budgets of the progressives on Capitol Hill. When I was talking about the Peterson Network here, I was mainly talking about Volume 2 in my Real Fiscal Responsibility series. But the first volume, which was about the progressive give-up formula, that volume was about the actions of the progressives on Capitol Hill in responding to Paul Ryan's conservative budgets, okay, with budgets of their own that tried to reduce the deficit at the cost, of course, of GDP. Now, they tried to claim that their 10-year budgets would bring a return to full employment in the first 2 years or so. But these weren't consistent at all with the sectoral balances. It was sure to be the case that moving into the third, fourth, fifth year, they were setting themselves up for another recession pretty quickly. And they put forward these budgets year after year after year, and we MMT folks would criticize the budgets, okay, and nobody was listening. They just stuck with the Peterson line all through this period of time, and they were perfectly good and friendly participants in the Peterson fiscal summits each year. But now let's move away from Peterson a bit and talk about the austerity coming in the Trump administration. Now, Trump gives every indication of going away in a very pronounced way from the Peterson brand of austerity, which assumes that there will be, which strives for small deficits and for situations where tax revenues are paying for, quote unquote, are paying for government spending. Okay? So he has that posture. But Trump has the posture of, yeah, let's cut all the social programs, and let's cut all the art, and let's cut all this stuff that's good for the human beings. And let's just have these huge tax cuts. And that the $10 trillion or so of tax cuts that he plans over 10 years are surely going to cause huge deficits. He doesn't seem to be bothered at all. So he's obviously planning on not having macroeconomic austerity because he's going to be running huge deficits. But he also is obviously planning on having microeconomic austerity for almost everybody else, okay, except for his rich cronies. He's planning on basically putting all these additional dollars in the economy where they will be looted by his extreme form of crony capitalism, which with each passing day seems more and more to approach a form of gangster capitalism.
That's
more
a
and
new
more
word.
seems to approach a kleptocracy. So he is going to give us gangster capitalism. He is going to give us a kleptocracy. And his deficits are not going to goose the economy very much because those deficits will, in the first round at least, be benefiting the very, very rich corporations and wealthy individuals. And we know what the fiscal multiplier effect of that is. It's only 30 cents on the dollar. So even if he has $1 trillion in deficits each year, that's only going to deliver 300 billion extra dollars into the economy. And he's planning on burning up a lot of that with expanded military expenditures, and only a part of it with the expanded infrastructure expenses. In other words, he's touting the infrastructure plan. It's $1 trillion plan. But over 10 years, that's only an average of $100 billion a year.
It's about Clinton level. We have a $500 billion a year trade deficit alone. I mean, just the trade deficit alone is 500 billion, or close to whatever squiggle line, 500 billion a year. We end up with 100 billion in deficit spending. We're still heading towards surplus, even with that.
Well, I'm saying that there might be $1 trillion of deficit spending under Trump. 1 trillion each year under Trump. But that trillion is only going to deliver $300 billion into the real economy.
I'm with you now. I understand.
It's only 30 cents.
Right. So, okay, so we have a question from the audience that I think that you would be very good at explaining. You did a phenomenal job a few episodes ago where you talked about the way the hyperinflation of the Confederacy occurred. And you talked about the Weimar Republic, and you talked about these different groups. Every time someone talks about modern monetary theory and are the things that we discuss, every single time they come back and they go, but inflation. Ellis has talked about the demand push or pull. Talk to us a little bit about what causes inflation and why printing money, which is not the right term, but why expanding domestic spending on the 99% is not going to inherently cause inflation. Can you talk about that for a second, Joe?
Sure. When you say government spending is government deficit spending is going to cause inflation, what you're saying is when the government comes in and gives money to consumers in a high fiscal multiplier situation, the fiscal demand, which is created by that, is going to exhaust the productive capacity of our economy so that there will be more money out there chasing goods than the economy is able to supply. That is not true, however. We know the economy right now is nowhere near full capacity. We're not sure what full capacity is quite either. In other words, once the deficit money starts flowing into the economy at the lower consumer levels, we may find that as the production gradually increases to meet the demand, we find that there's much more productive capacity than we thought in the economy. More and more people will be employed. We know that there are still 20 to 25 million people, I would estimate, who are disemployed. They're not picked up either in the U3 statistics of unemployment or the U6 statistics of unemployment because they've basically dropped out of the labor force. And they're doing other things. Those people can be counted upon to come back into the labor force if, for example, we had a program like the Job Guarantee Program. and they're going to kick up demand, and people will rush in to meet the demand, and they'll be looking to make use of the productive capacity to the fullest. Okay, someone asks, when was the last time that happened, Joe? The last time that happened was probably in the 60s, when we had a fairly close to full employment situation. Even that wasn't a total full employment situation. We have never had a situation in modern times, since we've had the fiat currency, where we have had a true full employment situation that caused an inflation. Yes, we had a serious inflation during the 70s a couple of times, running into the early years of the 1980s. But that inflation was caused by supply push, was caused by the attempts, of OPEC to control the oil supply in the earlier 70s, and the attempts of the Saudis to do the same thing during the latter part of the 70s. They were trying to restrict the supply so that the price would go up. Okay, so this was not a demand pull inflation. It was not caused by government spending. It was not caused by the government trying to make jobs. In fact, whenever Jimmy Carter saw unemployment start getting too low, he backed off stimulus spending because he was afraid it would cause inflation. So there never was, during those years, a full employment situation to test the hypothesis that demand introduced by the government to create a full employment situation could cause a demand pull inflation. And we have never had a test of that in modern times.
Joe, we have another question that I think ties
Yes.
right into this. And it's like, what about a recession?
What about a recession can be prevented?
Yes.
It is an easy thing to prevent a recession. An easy thing to prevent a recession. All we have to do is, if the economy is already spiraling down, then we have to introduce some stimulus fast. Then we introduce payroll tax holidays quickly, and also some revenue sharing with the states, and also some infrastructure programs. Some of that money comes online real fast, like the Social Security payroll tax holiday, and some later, but within 6 months. And then after 6 months, then the infrastructure spending comes online. And also during this period of time, or if you don't have a recession starting, but you have a situation now where the economy apparently still is on the way up, but you want to head off a boom-bust sort of situation, then I think the first thing to do is a federal job guarantee. Do that federal job guarantee at a living wage. Put that new automatic stabilizer into the economy.
So we got another question.
The number of people in the job guarantee program will show you whether we have full employment or not. As the number of people in the job guarantee program falls towards zero, you then will really know that you're getting to full employment and that you might have to start to worry about um, inflation. I think we have a long way to go until we get to that point. Okay, a new question.
It ties into the other stuff. Is inflation a rise in prices, or is it a drop in purchasing power of the currency?
What kinds of prices are you talking about? Are you talking about prices domestically, or are you talking about the prices of foreign imports?
They didn't say, but maybe you could take a peek at both, just as
Okay,
an aside.
in terms of the value of the currency, there are two ideas of the value of the currency here, which are intermingled. Okay. The first thing is the value of the currency in relation to buying goods that are produced here. And the second thing is the value of the currency in bringing in imported goods here. Because clearly, if the value of the currency falls in international exchange, then the prices, okay, of imported goods are going to rise here. However, there's no necessary tie-in. We could have a very rapid fire economy here in this country.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh, Joe, I think you're stuck, buddy. I think you're frozen, sir. I think Joe's frozen. All right. So while we wait for trying to get Joe's connection fixed here, I guess what we'll do is just try and take a moment, step back here, and I'll try and answer some questions. I'm not going to do it nearly as well as Joe. So yeah, hopefully we can get Joe back on here, though. These live streams make connectivity a beast. It's a hog. It's tough to work with. So in any event, let's see if we go here. What is a living wage? Just enough to pay the bills, or that which includes, let's see if we can get some other things up here. So Teresa says, what is a living wage? Just enough to pay the bills, or that include to pay for home, car, health insurance, and save for retirement? You know what? That's a great question. I think that there's a lot of people out there that would have a different perspective on that. I've talked to people like Joe who have an entirely different angle at looking at that, very, very much grounded in macroeconomic reality. And we have someone like Ellis who have a very different perspective, or any number of the other economists we have out there. I think there's a lot of factors that would go into that. You'd have to look at a lot of the different packages that we are offering people as part of citizen benefits, and the normal safety nets that are out there today, before we even get to a place of citizens benefits. Some people have said it's as much as $27 an hour. And it really does come down to, what does that include? I mean, the wage itself is less important than the services you get. So let's say I give you $2,500 to go to school. If they jack the price up to $3,000 and you don't have the extra $500, you still can't go to that school. So in my mind, when you look at what a living wage is, I think it includes the basics, the needs, food, shelter, clothing, heat, basic communications. I would imagine that would also include the ability to go to the doctor, to take care of your health. Again, the spectrum is broad and wide in how people view this. I would skew for a much larger basic income, or I should say a living wage, because I'm not a big proponent of the basic income on its own merits by itself, standalone. I would say that I would not be for that at all. Let's see if we can get somebody else up here. Another question from the audience till we get Joe back. Let's see who else is in here. Inflation is the number one red herring. So yeah, let's talk about that for a minute. Joe was on a roll there about the inflation. The fact of the matter is that until you have full employment, until we as a nation have full employment, and we would have to have an incredible amount of productive capacity completely wiped out before we would start seeing any inflation, meaningful inflation. I mean, you might have inflation based on, say, healthcare. If we go ahead and give everybody healthcare today, and there's not enough, workers out there to provide that service. I believe L. Randall Wray, when he was on the show with us, said that there's a possibility that you could see a spike in inflation and costs. You may even see some minor rationing while the job market absorbs the needed bodies to fulfill the demand. In the case like that, you might see a minor inflation, or you might see major inflation. Depends on the situation in terms of the amount of people able to provide the resources to, in fact, meet the demand of the population. Let's see who else we've got down here. Ellis, inflation is a complex subject that cannot be explained in a few minutes. Thank you for saving me there, sir. All right. So in any event, what I'm going to do is, rather than try to recreate the show Joe and I had, I'm just going to go ahead and say a few things, because we're heading into a very interesting time here. The Democratic Party has literally told progressives that we are not in any way, shape, or form important to them. You've got a lot of people in the Justice Democrats that were pushing for all-around good guy Sam Ronan. Sam Ronan had to drop out before it even got to the vote, folks. The Democrats were not interested in a progressive. Then they had the kind of progressive who gets things done, and Sam Ellison, another guy who had been praising Hillary and been complaining about progressives being mean to her, and he didn't even get in. No, they had to get the guy, Tom Perez, who is unfortunately the guy who basically would have been handpicked by Hillary Clinton, was a Hillary surrogate, is a guy who is anti-progress. Another big Wall Street guy, a guy who does not represent our needs at all. So in my mind, as we go forward, if you sit there and you see people trying to sheep you back in there, the Democratic Party has already proven it does not want us. Let's take them at their word and let's them exit. Take them at their word and leave. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end this a little bit early tonight. I hope you guys have a wonderful evening. We'll see you tomorrow night with Ellis Winningham. We're going to be talking about the job guarantee and some history of socialist movements, etc., throughout the history of time, and how we can't look backwards to move forward. So with that, have a great night, everybody. I'm Steve, and on behalf of Joe Firestone, have a good night, everyone.